Today, I'm joined by Jaclyn Bacchus, a playwright, screenwriter, and educator who's known for Men on Boats, India Pale Ale, and Wives. She is one of the core members of the Kilroys, a professor in playwriting at NYU Tisch, and a creative director at Fresh Ground Pepper, an artistic process lab in New York City. She's been known to explore and find new structures and themes, to find new ways to tell stories, and she's done just that in her writing. Selfishly, she's one of my favorite playwrights I've read in such a long time, and I'm so excited to be talking to her. Jaclyn, how are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. That's so nice. It's such a kind thing you just said.
Oh my gosh. I We were talking about it before we hopped on, but I send questions to everyone we interview, and the first three words in the first question I'm going to ask Jaclyn is just Jaclyn, you rock. That's all that's like all I wrote. So I'm such a big fan of India Pale Ale. My partner Liz, she's been on the show before. She loves Wives. It's like all of your work is just so cool. Um, and I wanted to start this off by saying, like, your style of you tread the line of like realism while also like talking about some like historical fiction and some wild satires and like characters and situations while also lifting up marginalized voices and like looking to social commentary. You do it all in your plays, and I think it's so interesting how you do it. What are some things that inspire you when you write? What do you look for when you're starting a project?
I that's a great question. I start a lot of my processes, my processes. I start them kind of. It's interesting that you talk about the kind of like layers or like threads in my work.
Mhm,
I always feel like there's like 4 or 5 different threads running.
mhm.
And usually the beginning of my process starts with what I call a snacks list. And it is essentially I make a list of 5 to 10 things that I'm obsessed with right now. And they can be small or large. They can be
Yeah,
huge societal contexts, or these big historical moments, and they can be small things too. They can be like the way that a joke my friend said, when we were having lunch, or
yeah,
like the way that my kid sneezes. It's like they
yeah.
can be really, really small, they can be really, really big. And I try to keep these lists, especially when I'm sparked with an idea for a project. Maybe there's something very specific. I
Mhm.
try to think of images or ideas or themes that feel connected, and that feel like they get me excited, that feel like they spark
Absolutely.
my interest, spark my joy.
Mhm.
And and so I'll make a list like that, and
Yeah.
often they range from like the completely inane and silly, to the very profound and kind of scary things that I'm like actually
Okay,
kind of
cool.
intimidated to get into.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm always inspired by history. I'm always inspired by
Yeah.
my family, my son, my parents.
Mhm.
I'm really inspired by global movements and patterns of immigration, that story within my
Absolutely.
history. And I'm
Yeah.
also super super always vibing on the desert and how weird the desert is, because that's where I grew up, was in Arizona.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
This
yeah, yeah. I think I saw
desert, like weird desert vibes.
yeah. It's so cool. I so many playwrights have, like, a very specific thing, but truly, like, whenever I read your stuff, I feel like when I open one of your plays, it can go in any different direction. Like, you that's and I've never heard of anybody writing out a list of things that they wanna, like, explore, like, multiple things that are completely different within one piece. It's really cool, and you can see it in your plays. One thing okay, I've been so excited to talk about this. Um, India Pale Ale was the first thing I read of yours. It has stuck with me like crazy. It's a play that when I read it, I was like, I loved reading it. I need to see this play as soon as possible, because it's so cool. Tell me where this play came from, and also please talk to me about how you wrote and where the concept of brown beard and this device came from. Because some of my favorite monologues and scenes are the scenes with brown beard. It just brings me so much joy. It brings me so much joy. So please,
Yes, yeah. So this is actually a great example of a play that started as one of these lists, right?
yeah,
I was like, I was really I was very, it comes from a place of feeling deep concern, as well as a place of
mhm,
like wanting to bring something joyful into the world. So, concurrently I was holding this, the play centers around, and the kind of lead up and aftermath to an anti-Asian hate crime inspired by some of the ones that were happening in the early 2000s as well as in the 2010s. And so I was really looking for a way to address this crisis as well as to offer a portrayal of the Sikh American community, which is a community that I'm from. And my mom is Sikh and grew up in a very tight knit community in Yuba City, California. And so I was
Mhm.
looking to showcase this community and to address some of these issues, but also to do it through a way that felt familiar, aspirational, and that there was some ability of joy to be accessed.
Yeah.
And so I was writing out these lists of like, okay, um, what are some worlds that I want to see on stage? I want to see inside the Gurdwara. I want to see the Langar Hall,
Mhm.
where they're making the food for the worshippers. I want to see this character, the central characters, her dreams and aspirations. So I was like, I think she opens a bar, and I was like,
Yeah.
I was vibing on that. So I was like, okay, so there's some interests and some exciting things to get into there. And then
Mhm.
I was like, I want to know who this family is and what kind of like familial language they have. And I was remembering when me and my brother were very young, the movie Muppet Treasure Island came out and was like, it was like
Such
a
a good
force to be
movie.
force to be reckoned with in our home, and
Absolutely.
like we still will like, me and my brother were like in our 30s, we'll like sit down on the couch when we're visiting our parents. We're like, should we put on Muppet Treasure Island? It's like, it's my brother's like a film bro, like not a
Yeah.
film, he's my literal film bro, but
Yeah.
but so it's this we have this like piratical language running through
Yeah.
this memories of childhood. And I started riffing on that and wondering about building out the story of this fictional family, the Batras, like wondering what kind of familial language they developed as when the children were young, when they were going through their own hardships.
Mhm.
How does that kind of grow and proliferate?
Yeah.
And the main character Boz, I think she really I think it becomes these kind of like warm, sort of intimate family languages that are filled with joy, chaos, like,
Yeah.
kind of, what is it? Like hugeness, expansiveness. Sometimes we rely on those things to get through like the hardest times in our life. And that kind of feeling that I feel about my family and the way that we weather hardships together, as well as the way that this, the pirate stuff started to become this like huge, all the storms became literal. They
Yeah.
became metaphors for like the things they go through in the play. And it became so fun to play with like that language of community and
Yeah.
like weathering hardships on the seas and, mutiny, uprising, wanting to, change the status quo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And it's also like, it was fun for the actors to do. Like we were just like riffing
oh,
on
I
like
bet.
beards, pants, giant pants, like,
It's awesome. It's so cool. I was reading it and it's so I love when a playwright takes like something that's like absurdist. It kind of reminds me of the it's the Paula Vogel play The Last Christmas Ride Home. The one where
mm,
it's like she uses these like three puppets to play the three kids and it's two adults and it's this like story of these people just driving to a Christmas party. And in the beginning you're like these kids are puppets. That's crazy. And by the end you've just like accepted it and similar to that, in this play, in the beginning, the first like big pirate monologue, I'm like, what the hell is going on? And then like by the end, every scene with the pirate, I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, it's so why do I see my family in these pirate scenes? It's wild. It was really cool the way you used absurdism and it's kind of like I don't know, you made it feel real. It was very, very oh gosh. I could talk about India Pale Ale forever. It's wonderful. Where did that premiere? Was that also at Playwright Horizons or was that at
that was at Manhattan Theater Club,
Manhattan Theater?
and they read an early draft of it, and actually were very instrumental in like a lot of the. We spent like workshops and workshops doing pirate movement sequences and stuff.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah,
so freaking cool. Well, I love whenever I go into an interview, I love doing research on people. And one thing I didn't know was that you're one of the creative directors of Fresh Ground Pepper, an
yeah.
arts company devoted to creators and exploring creative spirit and the creative process. Talk about what it's been like being in an artistic leadership position, and also what is Fresh Ground Pepper because it's like it sounds like one of the coolest companies ever. And I hadn't heard about them beforehand, so I want to know everything.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about FGP. We call it FGP, but fresh ground pepper, yes. So we've been around since 2009, and the shape that we've taken has morphed over. It's gone through many iterations
Yeah.
since its inception. At the beginning, it was about. I think I had just gotten out of college and kind of realized that like the things I was seeing were, the culmination of years and years of work. And I was really curious about like what goes into those years that an artist takes to make a play or make any kind of work of art that is not tied to production, that is more about finding out and unearthing,
Yeah.
what the thing actually wants to be, what it is. How do you find spaces to workshop that, to develop those kinds of early or mid stages of
Mhm.
creating something. So a couple of friends of mine, we all kind of coalesced to form essentially what was at first an event series, but then spawned, or kind of began to emerge into a series of programming that is more long term, that is
Yeah.
really kind of all devoted to allowing artists to explore what and why and how they're making what they make,
Yeah.
and allowing that kind of work to really enrich and deepen, I think, the art form itself. I think that like
Absolutely.
when we're able to give artists the resources, the space, the time to really devote themselves to their craft and to those big kind of dramaturgical questions, we're kind of not saying like, okay, this needs to be a blockbuster hit, this needs to be good now. We're not
Yeah.
putting that pressure on them. We're allowing them to kind of gestate and make things that
Truly, like, devoted to process.
exactly, like,
Yeah.
honoring the process allows for eventually a better and more enriching product, and something that can like impact the world in a deeper and more meaningful way. So,
Yeah.
we the way that we do that, we run a bunch of different development programs. We do like long-term writers groups. We do retreats. We've
Mhm.
even published like essays and articles about different artists' creative process. We made like a
Yeah.
zine a couple of years ago that I'm
Oh, that's
hoping that we
awesome.
bring back again.
Yeah.
But it's all about like trying to find new ways to fund development,
Mhm.
and to get that kind of money and those resources to artists
Yeah.
who are making things, who are in the midst of making things, who aren't like ready to premiere it.
Yeah, like,
Um,
emerging artists figuring out how to kind of navigate all of that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really like a lot of those kinds of spaces. There's been so many of those spaces, especially for as a playwright, I can recognize like how many different development spaces it feels like have started to close or shift their gears, or even like new play festivals. Like
Mhm.
there's been a lot of shuffling in the industry around
Yeah,
how to support that kind of work. So
absolutely.
it feels even more like it feels like at the beginning we were recognizing maybe our own need, and now sort of what it means for me as a leader to help facilitate that work. It's like it
Yeah.
feels actually like I'm giving back to the industry in some ways, or not even to the industry, to the artist, to the form, to
Yeah.
be able to like facilitate and steward other people's process. It's also very inspiring to me, like I get to be with amazing artists helping them work through these big questions, and
Yeah.
it gets me excited to continue making my own work. And it feels very like very meaningful to be able to help my the artistic community along with like the things they're making.
Absolutely. Ah, that's amazing. It feels like such a necessity right now because, I mean, like, just as you were saying, there have been so many New Works festivals that are either on hiatus or are moving around or anything, so having a company, a group that's completely devoted to artistic process and, like, figuring out you don't get to see that a lot, so that is so that's so wonderful. I was reading all about Fresh Ground Pepper, FGP, great nick I love it. I was reading all about it, and it seemed like a very, very cool company, so that's,
Yeah.
oh, wonderful,
Yeah,
but
if anyone's listening and they like want to get involved, go to our website fgpnyc.com.
no, absolutely, yeah, please do. But now I wanna ask about the play that, I mean, it's just like it's the one of the biggest plays. Your play, Men on Boats, has been performed all over the country. It tells the story of an 1869 expedition to chart the Green River and the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. Now you talk about your use of like male conquest as a way to talk about the imbalance in our media, in our history. What was the
Mhm.
process like writing this play? And also, how was it felt seeing it kind of take off in this like massive direction? I mean, like my school just did it a couple years ago. Like I feel like
Cool.
I've seen it kind of everywhere, and it's a wonderful play. So yeah, how's it felt like to see that play kind of take off in this massive way?
Yeah, I mean, that's it's really surprising. Like, I didn't think when I was going to be a writer that anyone would ever do my plays other than me, you know,
Yeah.
that I'd like self-produce it. It would go, it would happen, and then it would be in a drawer forever, you know. This
Yeah.
whole experience of like having a play be done. I mean, really, it's been done across the country, and it's been done in so many different ways. Like, it's been done by, you know, larger theater, like regional theaters. It's been
Yeah.
done by community theaters, by colleges, high schools even have done it.
Yeah.
And so there's like a lot of I feel a lot of like pride and kind of sort of like a sense of like honestly like sort of wonder. I'm like, wow, you know, it's very
No,
cool.
1000%.
But yeah, I mean, like when it comes to the writing of it, like I think so. I was actually, you know, speaking of development opportunities, I was given this amazing opportunity through the company Club Thumb to be
Mhm.
part of this emerging writer or early career writers group that they do called. I think it's called the Early Career Writers Group, but we called ourselves the Falcons. I don't know. we, we,
Yeah, that's
we,
so
we
cool.
picked a name for ourselves,
That's
but
great.
really everyone was there kind of working on something completely new. And for me, I was really craving to do something that felt very athletic, that felt like it was tackling some kind of expedition. And I
Yeah.
settled on the Powell expedition very early because it's something I had learned about in school. You know, and I was really curious about what it means to put something like that on stage. And
Mhm.
through writing it, I kind of started to feel the hypothesis emerging that like I was writing this because I wanted to capture something, that I'd never been able to perform myself, because at one point I was an actor and
Yeah.
I was being relegated to like the nurses or like the
Mhm.
dead ghosts of dead girls, you know.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
that was kind of my like trope, was like I'm a nurse or I'm a
I'm the
very
ghost of a
old,
dead girl.
yeah, ghost of dead girl, very old woman, like, you know, very like very old.
Yeah, 1000%.
um, so you know, I had my type. I was working, but as an actor, you know, I was always craving something more. And I remember seeing Blackwatch, this like Scottish play about the army, which was like really kind of dance theater. And I was like, why can't I ever do that? Like, why am I never allowed to do that? And
Yeah.
what does it mean? What do I learn about like the story of this kind of conquest or this expedition, this manifest destiny? What emerges if I were allowed to speak to that? And what started happening as I was like bringing in pages and as we did some of these first like workshops and readings, and as I started to work with a director, Will Davis, who ended up you know, having a huge hand in the development and
Yeah.
premiering the work alongside me, it was like it became apparent that like there was something really both exciting and challenging about you know, about offering these roles to people who are not like cis white men, and
Mhm.
also became it some kind of deeper truth about like the narrative that is presented in some of the source material
Yeah.
also really comes into question the way that people take up space or are allowed to take up space. It just it all of a sudden becomes, it calls into question the very kind of like essence of what it means to be running a river, starting to name things, and taking up space in the narrative in the way that some
Absolutely.
of these explorers did. So it like, you know, there was a lot of questioning and a lot of hypothesis, and I don't think I would have found a lot of the really amazing stuff early on that impacted the draft that I did had I not had some of those early development opportunities. But it's like
Mhm.
it all kind of exploded
Yeah.
when we got those people, that actors and collaborators in the room, like really kind of putting the thing in space.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's well, after I watched a video on you talking about Men on Boats and you talking about this, because when I first read Men on Boats, I was like, I was reading it and I read it in a completely like, I wasn't fully thinking about it. And then when I read it after hearing you talk about like your use of male conquest and like the imbalance of and like your point of view when you were writing it. And then I read Wives and I was like, "Oh my god, it was wonderful." It was just like amazing feminist piece. I love the way you explore like the great I love that it's like explored as like the great men of our history like through their lives. It's so much fun to like read this play and it's so cool. I would love to like end this interview by you talking about this wonderful play because oh, seriously, it's and like I said earlier, my partner's a huge fan of this show, so I feel obligated to ask a question just because I'll get in trouble if I don't. It's my, and it's just so good. So yeah, Wives, an amazing play. Please tell me everything.
Yay.
Yay. Yay.
I love Wives. So
Me
Wives,
too.
Wives, I started writing right after I wrote Men on Boats.
Mhm.
I was like pregnant. I was like, I'm on this retreat and I'm going to work on three different plays I have these ideas for, right? Because it was three different plays. I was
Yeah.
like, I want to write this play about Ernest Hemingway, and I want to write this play about this chateau I went to on my honeymoon. It was like I visited in France, where like this one man lived with his wife, his mistress, and it just felt very convoluted. And I was
Yeah.
like, it's so interesting how this space feels charged with like the essence of someone, a great man with many wives. And then I same thing with the with Act 3, which is about this
Mhm.
Rajasthani Maharaja. He had a concubine, he had many wives, he had like this sort of another like constellation of women
Mhm.
around him. So I was interested in all three of these things, not realizing that they were operating on the same metric and writing them each as their own play. And what I became really obsessed with was, as it emerged that I was most interested about in talking about the women rather than in talking about these central men. I realized the kind of similarities between these three plays, and I was like,
Mhm.
well, big question: what happens when I cram them all together? And I realized that, like, what does it mean to have an actor
Yeah.
play four different great men? What does it mean
Yeah.
for these women to play, to kind of like alternate roles between like the grieving wife of Ernest Hemingway and like the sorceress concubine to a a Maharaja? Like, what
Yeah.
does it mean for someone to be like the cook in this like French castle and then be like a British colonizer
Mhm.
in the British Raj in India
Yeah.
in like the turn of the 19th century? Like, I didn't know, but I was excited about what I learned through putting them all together was that like I it really becomes a play about like who do we see ourselves as, who does society say that we are based on our gender or on who we're in proximity to.
Yeah.
And who does the patriarchy put on us versus who are we actually, and how can we express that, how can
Absolutely.
we
Yeah.
define that on the page? And so what ended up happening is I realized that there was an act 4 to this piece, which is I think my favorite act,
It's
that
my favorite act.
is all about me, a very close facsimile of me trying to understand and comprehend and put on the page who I am and who I can define myself as in as most expansive language as possible.
Yeah.
And like I think that like it does ask the question, like, who can we be if we are the ones to define ourselves instead of
Yeah.
society, instead of our relationship to the heteronormative patriarchy
Absolutely.
that rules us. So
It's such an earned and satisfying act 4. Oh, I love when you read it. I don't wanna, like, everyone should go read Wives. I lost my mind when I read it, but truly, like, it's such a wonderful exploration. It's also on top of all this, it's just so funny. It's
yeah.
it's one of, like, the funniest plays I've read in such a long time. Oh, it's just so good.
It was really fun to tap into the humor. I'm glad. I mean, I think that for me, and this is a kind of running through line for all of my work, is
Yeah.
that it's kind of the way I view the world is through all the pain and all the hardship. I have to and continually look for in my own life the ways that I can find something funny to hold on to, find something to
Yeah.
grasp to that brings me like laughter and joy. If you ever see a play with me or are in a theater with me and I see something, like I laugh really loud, like people turn and look at me, like I
It's
try to
amazing.
bring my joy and my in laughter kind of like to the forefront of my work and my practice.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's just like if we can find the way to laugh at things, I feel like then
Yeah.
we can find the way to talk through the stuff that's really kind of that we're all really grappling with.
Yeah.
And so that's a big way in for me is
Yeah.
finding the funny first.
Absolutely. And also before I get, because I wanna ask one last question, but before I get there, I wanted to ask, all of your work, I feel like also sometimes when I read a play, I'm like, "Oh, man, like, I wanna see this in this huge space," or, "Oh, this is perfect for a black box." And every single play I've ever read of yours, I'm like, "This can be done anywhere." It can be done in such a versatile, it's like you write, do you think about that at all going in, or because your plays are so specifically, like, it could be done in like, I wanna see Oh gosh. I wanna see India Pale Ale done on Broadway in this huge, massive way, but then I also wanna see it in a black box of, like, my, like, hometown, and it's crazy to be able to read all of your work and see both those things. Do you, like, think about that at all while you're writing of, like, the versatility of the set and the versatility of the story?
Yeah, I mean, I think that because I started as an actor, and because a lot of the early works I was doing were very much, it was very self producing, it was very devised,
Mm.
it was very much like many people coming together to like open the trunk and see what's possible. I
Yeah,
think that I put a lot of value in my collaborators, specifically directors and designers, vision for the piece. Like,
absolutely.
I think Will Davis once, he called Men on Boats like a blueprint from which he could then build a staging that worked for
That's so
him,
true. Yeah.
and like a design aesthetic and language that worked for the play. And I think that I have enjoyed seeing so many different interpretations of my work.
Mhm.
Um, so for me it is kind of, I write in my mind, it's like the full hydraulics version
Yeah,
of Men on Boats, where it's like we're actually on the river. Like I see
yeah,
it kind of cinematically, but I know that it will never be that. Like I embrace the nature of theater, and so I
yeah.
do, then I think by embracing that it will never be that, I'm embracing whatever vision, a collective has to bring to the table.
Absolutely.
So I'm
Oh,
so ready for the Broadway version, and I'm also like, yes, bring me the cardboard props.
1,000%. That's it's so cool to, like, read through a playwright's entire canon and be like, "I could see all of these plays done in every facet." It just gets me so excited, and that's what excites me so much about your work is the versatility and, like I said in the beginning, the betweenness of everything, the playing with the humor and the historical fiction and all of this stuff and the feminism and everything is just it's so good. I end most of my interviews like this, but just know that this one, maybe most, is selfishly for me. Is there anything that you're working on? Is there anything that you wanna talk about? Because on truly, again, I want everyone to hear about it, but selfishly, I, Justin Borak, would like to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's see. I'm one of those writers that's working on five things at the same time.
absolutely.
And that's so I can, if I get puzzled by something, I can give it time by working on something else, right? So
Yeah.
I'll talk about, like, I'll see how many I can think of,
Well,
or
please
that
do,
that
please.
feel exciting right now. Last week I just had a week at the Mercury store working on a new piece I'm writing, about the genesis. It's loosely inspired by the genesis and the origin story behind Biosphere 2, which is like this terrarium in
Oh,
Arizona, a
Sonia?
terrarium in Arizona that housed 8 kind of like theater adjacent scientists inside for 2 years.
Wait,
So
really?
yeah, it's a real story, and I've been there, and it's part of Arizona lore.
Yeah,
So I'm exploring that, this
yeah,
idea of like lightly, having the hypothesis to terraform planets, and like what
yeah,
that takes, and who signs up for something like that.
yeah,
So I'm working on a little Biosphere 2
yeah.
inspired project. And I'm working on a play about two middle school girls in the like late 90s who find a portal inside their local mall. Um,
That's sick.
so they, it's a little bit of a like kind of space and time travel
Yeah.
happening in that piece. But
Oh,
yeah,
that's
that
so
one's
fun.
also desert aesthetic.
Yeah.
And
So
I'm
much
working on,
desert aesthetic. I love
yeah,
that that's
desert.
the through line for all your work.
Yeah, I know. It's like if we could just get like a rolling sort of like one of those rolling scrims that's just like
Just the
cactus, like saguaro cacti, and like a coyote.
that's amazing.
That's all I want. And then
Yeah.
yeah, and then I'm working on another piece that is a couple of commissions, one for Oregon Shakespeare Festival
Mm.
about more about the 70s in Yuba City.
Yeah.
Kind of a little 70s period piece, murder, and then one about the this girl in the like early 2000s doing a book report about the Secret Garden and having a lot of questions. So
That's
yeah,
amazing. That was maybe my favorite 3 minutes of my life. It was so exciting. That was so cool. Oh, I can't wait to
yeah.
hear about this. I cannot wait to read all of them. Jaclyn, seriously, I cannot say it enough. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is super fun, and yeah, I'm just so excited to um to hear about like what people are taking away from my work, and yeah,
Yeah.
to talk to you is like super great.
Oh, I'm so glad. All right. Well, KJ, we'll get to the next segment.